Hi grade 6, welcome to lesson 6 of math. Today we're going to be learning about the properties of addition. Now while we are doing learning at home, what I'm going to be doing is actually jumping around a little bit in this unit. I'm going to try and save some of the trickier lessons for when we can be back at school together and I can help you with them. So don't be confused, don't be alarmed if we skip a lesson or two here or there. So like for instance, yesterday you did lesson 4 and today we're doing lesson 6. That is on purpose. So just follow along with whatever lesson we happen to be doing that day. So today we're going to be learning about the properties of addition, and there are 3 different properties that we're going to look at. And a property is really, you can think of it kind of just like a rule or something that is true about addition. And I'm going to start with the simplest one, and the simplest addition property is the 0 property. And the 0 property just means that if you take any number, so let's take for instance the number 3, and I add 0 to it, the answer is always going to be the original number. Okay, so no matter what number it would be, if I would do 347, let's say, and I added 0, my answer would still be that original number, that 347. All right, now a bit of math vocabulary. The word that your textbook is going to use is addend, and an addend is just a fancy word for a number that you add. So here, we had the addend of 347, and we have the addend of 0. We're adding them together to get our sum of 347. Okay, so the 0 property, very simple. If you take any number and you add 0 to it, your answer or your sum is going to be that original number. So very, very simple. The next property that we're going to look at is the commutative or order property. And what this means is if I take 2 addends or 2 numbers, so let's do 3 plus 10. If you add those together, the answer is going to be 13. But what the commutative property shows is that instead of doing 3 plus 10, what you can actually do is switch the order around and do 10 plus 3. And I think we know and we can agree that if you do 3 plus 10, the answer is going to be 13. But if you start with the 10 instead, so you switch the order of those addends, switch the order of those numbers, and do 10 plus 3, the answer is going to be 13, right? 3 plus 10 gets us a 13, 10 plus 3 gets us a 13. So all the commutative or order property is saying is that you can switch around the order of the numbers that you are adding, and it's not going to make a difference to your final result or your final sum. Then the last property that we're going to look at today is the associative or the grouping property. And I want to make it clear that this is a different property than the commutative property, though it's going to seem very similar. So just follow along with me. So what you can do when you are adding longer strings of numbers together is you can group certain numbers together. So let's do 8 plus 5 plus 15. Now what I can actually do is I can group 2 of my addends together and add those numbers first. So I could start out and do 8 plus 5, and 8 plus 5 gets me a 13. And then I can add it to my 15. 13 plus 15 gets me a 28. However, what I could do instead, and it would actually be a smarter way to do this, or a better way for in terms of mental math, is instead of doing my 8 plus 5 first, I could do my 5 plus 15. So now my 5 and 15, I like to call them friendly numbers. Your textbook will call them compatible numbers, and it just means that they're really nice and easy to add in your head, and you end up with a nice round number. So in this case, 5 plus 15 gets you a 20. So now we have an 8 over here, and we do 8 plus 20 gets us a 28. So all of these things are equal. So no matter which addends you group together and add first, you're going to come up with the same answer. So it's very similar in a sense, to the commutative property, right? We changed the order and we ended up with the same answer on both sides of that equal sign. Over here, we ended up with the same answer again, but this one's really talking about taking two addends and grouping them together. So here we grouped 5 and 15 together. Here we grouped 8 and 5 together. And this side was a little bit easier to do with mental math, okay? A big clue that the associative property is being used is the use of those brackets, okay? So if you see those brackets grouping addends together or grouping numbers together, that's the easiest way to pick out that the associative property is being used. Then before I end this video, I just want to go over some of the questions that you are going to be doing for practice today, just to make sure that you know exactly what I'm expecting you to do. So you're going to start off by doing the check understanding. We haven't done that yet, but that it's at the top of page 13 in lesson 6, the check understanding. Okay, so that's letters A through F. Now for the check understanding, it gives you examples of one of the three properties, and you have to choose the property that matches it. And for that, the instructions say you have to write out commutative property, associative property, zero property. I'm happy if you just write C for commutative, A for associative, and Z for zero. Okay, so all I'm looking for in the answer for letters A through F is just the first letter of the property that is being shown. Then for numbers 1 through 6, the instructions are to write the missing addend. Okay, so what they're going to show you is an equation, and you have to tell me what is missing. All right, so what you have to think to yourself is, what needs to go in the blank for the equal sign to be true? So I gave you an example here. If you see a question that looks like this, over on the left-hand side, we have 7 plus 2. Well, what would have to go on the right-hand side in order for that equal sign to be true, in order for both sides to be equal? Well, we have a 7, but what we are missing is the number 2. Okay, so you have to think about what is missing. And in your books, you don't have to rewrite the whole equation. You can just write what is missing or what fits in the blank. Then the last section, numbers 7 through 12, what they are going to give you is an equation, and they would like you to rewrite it using the associative property, which really just means to group the addends differently, okay? So here's an example of what you might see. 7 plus 5 is being grouped together, and then we are adding a 15. So this is what you would see in your textbook for numbers 7 through 12. What you have to do in your notebook is regroup it, okay? So notice that over here we had 7 plus 5 being grouped together. Over here, what you're going to do in your notebook is you are going to group different numbers together to make it a little bit easier to solve mentally. Okay, so you're going to group your 5 and 15 together because that makes the nice round number of 20. And then it's very simple to come up with the answer of 27. Okay, so make sure for numbers 7 through 12, here's where I'm going to need to see a whole equation. I'm going to need to see something that looks like this. Your equation with, or your, I guess you could say your questions, your addends being regrouped along with whatever numbers are left over, and then your final sum, your final answer. And that'll be it for today's math lesson. Hopefully that makes sense. If you have any questions, please let me know.